Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Nick Jamel again. This is episode 6, and today we're going to talk about what it means to be a liberal and how that word came up and how it's evolved over time and what it means for us today. And um, I've kind of been inspired a little bit by Dave Rubin's uh, movement to take it back. I think I've always kind of felt along those lines, pretty similar to him and sorry, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I think that we can reclaim the word as a true liberally minded person. Um, and so uh, let's get into it, I guess. So the word comes out of, it really was evolved out of the Renaissance. And it was people who were focused on individuality and generally against the statism and the feudalism that was around. And so the way that they pitched it was based in empirical evidence. Their findings were not tied to uh, um, state regulations or the religions that were very, very at the time. And I'm a Catholic, I can say that, so the Catholic Church at the time was very political and very influential and really against a lot of freedom and individuality, and the governments at the time were the same way. And England made a lot of progress in this actually, and that's kind of where we get a lot of our ideas by looking at Greek thought and seeing, the ability for people to think freely and to come to their own conclusions as long as you follow a logical process. And I think, and you can come from a different assumption, and I talk about this with people, we can come to totally different agreements as logical people on an issue, as long as we come from a different assumption. I know it's a hot topic, but like the abortion issue, I think you can have a libertarian view as long as if you say that it's a life, you're going to come to the conclusion that you can't take a life by force, and so, that's a libertarian view. If you say that it's not, and you say that it's a part of the woman's body, then I have no right to govern her body. I agree with that 100%. So, you can see how those two sides can have the same principle upheld, but because it's a life and it's not a life, that's why you can't get to that agreement on it. And so that's what liberalism is saying. So now the question isn't, you know, is abortion bad, blah, 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 and all this stuff. Is it a life or is it not? Because we have this principle and we agree on the principle, we just don't agree on the assumption. And if we can figure out which assumption is true, really by empirical evidence and by analysis, then we can come to a conclusion. And that's what's happened with the way our government works and free markets and all these things. I'm a capitalist, and so if you want to talk about uh, which forms of an economic system work, well, I've never seen socialism work, but capitalism gave us America, and so I think we can see who wins out on that, yeah, ideologically wise. And so that's, liberalism is about, again, I'm getting off track, but liberalism is about individuality and looking at what works and what doesn't, and having the ability to be open and expressive and free. Liberal comes from liberty, which is, my personal freedom. And so that's where the word comes from. And I would consider myself to be a classical liberal. Like a Jefferson, George Washington, the founding fathers, like their ideas. It's tough to find a better set of ideas than what's written into our, the beginning of of our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And then, there's a little bit in there that you can disagree with, especially along the lines of the amendments and stuff like that. But I think, there's never been a system that's been created by man that's better and that's more in line with natural law. And that's going to be a topic of discussion for another time, is natural law. But so that's kind of what I think of a liberal as, is someone who's free, open, expressive, and you don't have to be left-wing or right-wing to be a liberal. I mean, you can have both. Like, you can be a religious person who believes in, I can say, to me, a liberal idea is saying, I'm a evangelical Christian. I believe homosexuality is wrong, but I'm not going to invade into your life. That's liberal. You can believe it, you can live your life your way, because you know what? You don't hurt me. You just can't make me walk in your marches. That's liberalism, And on the other side of the aisle, it's, saying, hey, I'm a, radical feminist, but there's men out there being, falsely accused of, sexual crimes, and before they even, and they get their name, they get cleared in the justice system because there's a false accusation, but they're done for life. I want to speak out against that. That's liberal, because you believe, your passion is this other idea or this other idea, and you can still come across and say that's wrong. And, you can think freely, and you can have these nuanced gray area discussions that, can be tense, but as long as you can come at them objectively, you'll see that, and even a little bit subjectively, because we can't completely get rid of our perceptions and our beliefs and our bias. But, if you can force yourself to look at things objectively, you'll find that helps. And so liberal, for the longest time, especially in America, was the people who wanted limited government, who wanted more freedom, who wanted businesses to be what they can do, what they want to do, who wanted to let people live their lives the way they want to live. Jefferson is, about as liberal as you get for the most part, and I know he had his faults with some, slavery, and I get it. I'm not defending him on those things. We all have terrible faults, some worse, some not as bad, but we all have issues. But he wanted people to live, like on their own farm, 10 miles away from the next guy, all across America. That was his vision. He wanted, to be spread apart, just not messing with each other, and, and the urbanization of America really kind of crushed the true liberal idea, I think, because now you have, in New York City, we have 8-9 million people, something like that, living together in a city. Chicago, you have 4 to 5 or 6 million. I don't even know. I don't know the numbers, but crazy amounts of people living together. And so now, when you have all these different perspectives and points of view, people can't be expressive without offending somebody. People can't, believe what they want to believe without offending somebody, or, and all this stuff. And so as that grew, as the cities grew, you find that, statism grows, because you have to regulate interactions between people, supposedly. You can't have people duking it out in a bar between two guys. I don't know. If you both agree to a fight, well, I think you're fine. For the longest time, congressmen used to go have duels. They had a place set up outside of, the House of Congress for people to go out there and duel. So I think if you want to solve something between two people, you should be able to do it however you like, if you agree on it mutually. And that's a liberal idea, I would say. And so, but what happens is as you have to coordinate more people, the state steps in more and more and more and more. And eventually, as the more the state steps in, the less liberal a society is, no matter what. And that's because being liberal means that I have the right to choose for myself. I have the ability to choose for myself. And if I want to enter into an agreement with anybody about anything, as long as it doesn't harm somebody or exert force or coercion in the process, then I should have the right to do that. And that's where, the state stepping in is the problem. And you see this hugely in the early 20th century. This is where, the progressive movement is where they start to hijack this idea of being liberal. And, so the prohibition, making marijuana illegal, I would say feminism was a true liberal movement, giving women rights to vote. That's a true actual liberal. It kind of fell under the progressive cloud at the time because, it is a progressive idea. But a lot of the progressive ideas at the time were really retroactive. Eugenics was a progressive idea. it was happening here as well. I mean, they were sterilizing people in prison. Felons were getting sterilized because they couldn't be trusted. The mentally challenged people were being sterilized because they didn't want them having offspring. And Woodrow Wilson did this. That's true. I mean, I think at least 20-something thousand people were done or were sterilized under this, and poor people, just because they're poor. So they're obviously, they thought there had to be something wrong with them, not that they just maybe made bad life choices. Maybe they did. They weren't the best people. I mean, sometimes maybe, but you still don't deserve that ever. Especially forced sterilization by the state. That's not right ever. And so as the state grew, they took our freedom away from us bit by bit, inch by inch, in the name of liberalism. And they started taking this phrase and calling the people who were in favor of preserving the Constitution conservative. And I guess you could consider people, because if you read Roger Scruton, what he'll say is conservatism is maintaining the Constitution that founds your country. So yeah, but if you're conserving the most liberal Constitution, the most free and beautiful Constitution that gives more rights to more people than any other Constitution ever on the face of the earth, then I would consider yourself to be a fairly liberal person, even though you're conserving and you're being a conservative in that sense. You're conserving liberalism. And that's what's under attack, is true liberty and true liberalism. And that's where FDR, he saw his opportunity to just hijack all the power from the states and just destroy people's freedom. And he ended up prolonging the Great Depression. I mean, almost any economist will agree on that. And I mean, there's some who can say that he shortened it. I mean, if it weren't for World War II, and I mean, I guess you could say him getting lucky on that break for him as a president. It's a horrible situation, but by having to enter into that, he kind of redeemed him in a way, because he was screwing everything up. If it weren't for that, he's obviously the worst president ever. I think he still might be, but it just Woodrow Wilson's up there with him too. And so these guys thought they had this elitist Hegelian point of view in which they think they know best, and because they know best, they're here to help you. And that's not what liberalism is. Liberalism is, if you want to have a charity, you can organize yourself freely from the government and help people, yeah. But the government should not be doing it, because if the government is getting involved in something, they have to take someone else's freedom or someone else's property or someone else's rights in order to give you more. There's no way. They can't generate their own property. They can't generate anything on their own. They have to take it from somewhere and move it somewhere else. And so the hijacking of liberalism happened from the 20s to the 40s, and by about the 60s, when everything was going on with hippies and free love and all that, I mean, they forget also that they were protesting, when they were protesting the Vietnam War, that they're protesting a huge liberal and progressive of LBJ, because I don't know, people just don't understand things. But so by then it was pretty much sealed that liberalism was statism, because to be liberal, they thought it meant that you just latch on to new fashionable ideas. And in the 20th century, socialism and communism was the new fashionable idea. And so that's how it grew, was control, status control, in order to give the poor more freedom by, enslaving them to you for free stuff. I mean, that's not liberty. That's, trading in my essence of a human being to, to be free and to be whatever I can be to the state for food stamps and for Section 8 housing and these kinds of things that they're just, infantilizing the country. And that's wrong, because I believe that as a liberal, you should seek to give them freedom and give them means to better themselves. They should have an access to a good education, not what most public school education is. They should have access to, being able to build a business without government stepping in the way. I mean, it's incredible how hard it is to start a business, and it shouldn't be. And that's what keeps people poor, because I'm sure a lot of poor people who have good ideas who could figure something out to make a business out of themselves, who, are a Joe Schmo plumber or a Joe Schmo electrician who have 3 kids, and so they kind of fall under that poverty line, and they're trying to figure out a way, or a waitress who has a good idea, or a cook at a restaurant who has a good idea to, and a skill for cooking, and they want to start their business as a restaurant, but they can't because it's too hard to navigate the hoops. That's what's holding people back from being free and from being better. And so the way I think we need to take back liberalism is by having the discussions objectively, and really diving into things that are tough to talk about, and really, really just having the sense of what solution provides more freedom for everybody without taking other people's freedom. And that's where we're going to see liberty come back, and true liberalism see a resurgence. And that's what I hope for America, because we are an incredible experiment. We've had incredible results, and I think we're proof that true, real, actual liberalism works, that Jeffersonian liberalism works, that the Constitution is a great idea and that it works. You see, because the fruits of a tree are what determine, how great of a tree it is. If you have an apple tree and it doesn't have any apples, well, then it's just a tree. It's no different than any other tree. But if you have an apple or if you have a tree that's just bushels of apples every year, well, then that's the kind of tree you want. And it's the same for a constitution. It's the same for anything. If you have a set of rules that allow people to be free and prosperous, and that you can go from 100 years, a little over 100 years ago, only J.P. Morgan had electric lights. Now people have, I'll hold my phone. Now even like poor people in America, what are considered America's poor, have a phone that has a calculator, has access to the internet. The whole wealth of the world's knowledge is in this thing. And that's happened in 130, 140 years. I'm not sure exactly when J.P. Morgan lit up his house with electric lights, but even let's say it's 150 years, let's say it's 100 years. That's the change we've had, that the richest of the rich were lighting their house, and now the poorest of the poor have almost all of the world's knowledge. Any game, anything you can possibly think of pretty much can be developed and put into a phone. And that's in the poorest of the poorest pockets for the most part. So that's what freedom produces. That's what our Constitution produces. And that's what liberty and real liberalism is about. So if you like what I have to say, and you really want to help me out with pushing this idea, because this is what this whole thing's about, because I want to discuss other topics as well, but I really want you to understand that the point is I want to have free discussions about all sorts of things. And without true liberty, that's not going to be possible for us for long. And so this is a bit of a rant, and it's a bit, I guess it's a little bit heated, I would say, and it's a very big passion of mine that we are free. And so, because I think we're meant to be free. And so if you like what I have to say, and you want to join in the conversation of our generation here, as I like to say, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, or like my video, subscribe to my channel. And if you want to join in on the conversation, please just put in a comment and let me know what you think. Give me your feedback, your ideas, your questions, your concerns, and maybe we can really create a true discussion and a new, fresh liberalism that we can pull ourselves out of this last 100 years of what I would almost consider to be a miniature dark age of just people stealing people's freedom all over the world, and push it into letting us truly be free and live and have our liberty. And so thank you guys. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you again soon.